Hello, everybody, and welcome to the SWAN Americas Alliance webinar, Enhancing Utility Operations through ITOT Convergence. Thank you for joining us, and we have a really exciting program for you. Before we get started, I have a few announcements related to SWAN, so hang on tight before we get to the meat of the programming. For those of you who are not familiar with SWAN, SWAN is the Smart Water Networks Forum, and we are transforming water together. To do that, we bring together everyone in the water sector from idea to pipe to help advance the smart water industry through reports, educational calls, and other collaborations. We just came off of our 15th annual conference in Berlin, Scaling Smart Water. The slides and presentations are available online for all those who attended. The recordings will be available for members and those who attended soon. For our jet setters out there, we've got plenty of events coming up all around the world, from London to Sydney, Cape Town, and then especially for my Americas-based folks, pay attention for SWAN 2026 in Tampa, Florida, the first week of June. We'll have a call for abstracts out later this year. We also have plenty of upcoming virtual events from a teaching series, startup community, thinking about data as a service, the IUG group, and digital twins. Be on the lookout for information about those events, and remember to bookmark our events calendar to always stay in the know. And we have 3 new reports. 2 of them came out of our European Alliance, Adaptive Data Management and Climate Resilience. And then, as you're here today, the Americas Alliance just put out a new report, Enhancing Operations through ITOT Convergence. So these are available to SWAN members, so please take a look at those. And they're really, really chock full of great knowledge. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to our moderator today, who's Miller Truby. He is the Customer Success Manager at Turing, and he's also one of our co-leads for the Americas Alliance Technical Committee. So over to you, Miller.
Thank you very much, Maddie. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone who is joining us for this webinar. This should be some great content today. As Maddie was just saying, SWAN has quite a lot of reports and knowledge base articles out. This webinar today is based on one of the more recent reports that came out on the exact title of today's webinar, the Enhancing Utility Operations through IT and OT Convergence. The idea here is to highlight some of the case studies that came out of that and talk a little bit more in depth about what that means, why it's important, and why SWAN thinks that this is something we should all be focusing on within this industry. So before we get to the meat, we want to do a little bit of acknowledgement time here. So we have all of the project leads on the call with us today. So Billy Rosman, Jennifer Suttles, Clint Fletcher, and of course SWAN's own Maddie Zimmerman. We also got contributions on this report from Alan Tucker, Andrew Swirsky, Ben Rukavina, Brandon Ernst, John Watson, Justin Wilson, Michael Carl, Peter Murphy, Richard Hake, Sean Dent, Stephanie LeBlanc, Tom Kaczynski, and Tori Carlson. And the case studies were authored by Aviva, City of Houston, Texas, City of Salem, Oregon, Halifax Water, Loudoun Water, Schneider Electric, St. Louis Metropolitan Sewer District, Streametric, and Yokogawa. So thank you to everyone who participated in making this report the great piece of knowledge sharing that it is. Specifically, we will be highlighting the case studies from Halifax Water and Loudoun Water today on the call. But everyone who was involved in this put in a significant amount of work. The project leads especially all put in a significant amount of time and effort on this, and we hope everyone will go and read the full report. It is available to SWAN members. With that, we will jump into, we're going to kind of start at the end today. So we are first going to have the project leads, who have all been kind enough to join us today, go through the sort of methodology of putting together the report, how it all came together, and then talk a little bit about sort of the conclusions and why we think it's important, and then we will let the case study authors talk about the actual case studies that they put together. So we have Jennifer Suttles, Billy Rosman, and Clint Fletcher on with us today. Jennifer leads the asset management team for the Eastern region at Carollo Engineers. Her first job in the water industry was in 1989 as a co-operator. And she says you can do the math on that if you want to know how long that means she's been in the industry. Before coming to Carollo in 2024, she worked as a tech services director at one of the large metro Atlanta utilities. Billy Rosman, PhD and PE, is part of Hydro Digital. They are a leader in the collection system digital twins and real-time controls. He's also the SWAN America's research lead and a researcher with the University of Colorado Boulder. His experience spans engineering design, modeling, software development, control systems, and data analytics. And then finally, we have Clint Fletcher, who is the National Digital Solutions Lead for Brown and Caldwell. He has a focus on operational technology and enterprise technology data management and over 16 years of experience in technology delivery. So with that, over to Jennifer to introduce us to the report itself.
Thanks, Miller. So you've likely heard a lot of buzz in the industry over recent years about IT/OT convergence. I mean, you're evidenced by your attendance today in this webinar. But what does that exactly mean? Well, there was a whole lot of painstaking discussion that went on about the definition of IT/OT convergence, and this is what the group settled on. So IT/OT convergence is the secure unification of IT and OT through people, process, governance, and technology to increase real-time data exchange, which enhances operational and design decisions and enables process analytics such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, and digital twins. So the IT, or information technology side of this, contains the systems to address your business needs, such as your enterprise resource planning software, your GIS, your maintenance management system, etc. This data is typically in the format of a relational database or records-based data. Downtime is an inconvenience, but can typically be tolerated for short periods. Conversely, the OT side, or the operations technology side, is made up of the SCADA system and associated components. This data is typically in the form of time series data. Downtime is typically not tolerated in an OT system, as operations depends on OT for keeping the plants running. Individually, both of these systems are critical to the success of a utility, but bringing the two sources together into one platform creates opportunity to be more effective in many different aspects of a utility. IT/OT convergence provides opportunities for enhanced cybersecurity, easier, more natural collaboration between divisions, tearing down those silos, streamlining regulatory compliance, increasing operational efficiency, promoting situational awareness, and facilitating workforce training. Next slide. So what are some examples of IT/OT convergence? One example is the creation of smart sewers with real-time control for the purposes of preventing sanitary sewer overflows and managing the flows into water reclamation facilities. A converged system can consume information from many different data sources with which to make operational decisions, including pump station flow data and gate positions from SCADA, IoT flow and level sensors from a flow monitoring contractor platform, rainfall projections from an external weather service, rainfall response predictions from a sewer hydraulic model, etc. Bringing all of these sources together in one platform makes decision-making on the fly much more accessible. Some of the potential outcomes from that application is reduced regulatory violations for overflows, real-time awareness of system capacity, and new operators can quickly build system knowledge. Another example of IT/OT convergence is the use of a digital twin for optimizing treatment plant operation. Generating a platform which incorporates water quality monitoring data, chemical dosing, energy consumption, etc., allows the user to easily consider different scenarios to most effectively and efficiently treat water. Some of the potential outcomes from this application: again, new operators are trained more quickly with better feedback. There's secure access to the data that both engineers and managers and anyone else in the utility who needs the data can access, and potential for decreasing chemical and energy usage. So we'll hear about real-world examples when we get to the case studies portion of this presentation. But first, I'm going to hand it over to Billy to discuss the people side of IT/OT convergence.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So, as Jennifer just mentioned, she kind of went through why do IT/OT convergence? What are the benefits? And really, there are a ton, because IT/OT convergence is really the foundation for a lot of the really exciting projects people want to work at and exciting outcomes people want to work on. People want to have access to their data. They want to be secure. They want to be able to do analytics projects, work with digital twins. And as Jennifer said, you have these two groups, IT and OT, that have very distinct priorities, almost flip priorities. And so it's really important for executive leadership to understand all those benefits and all the challenges. And so when we're talking about who's involved in this process, it really starts with strong executive support of really understanding that why and moving it forward. And these other change makers, you have program management, procurement, project management, you have your stakeholders. These are fairly typical teams that are going to be operating on different utility projects. So program management is probably going to be something that your organization is well versed in. And the stakeholders, these are really the people in an organization who consume the data. These are the people that rely on ITOT data managed by others. So often you might have someone in treatment that wants to know distribution data or supply data. So whenever you're reaching across different departments or use cases, there might be kind of blockages there where people don't have visibility or access to data. Those are going to be your stakeholders to really drive what the business drivers are, what those use cases are, to make it clear who can benefit from this. The next slide. Really kind of at the heart of it. Maddie, is there one right before this? Great, thank you. So really at the heart of this, what makes this sort of program project distinct is the IT and OT teams, which honestly, they're usually playing kind of a supporting role in many projects, but here they really come to be leaders and at the forefront, at the heart of what we're doing. And often IT and OT staff might not interact at all, or they might not know each other. This really will vary across organizations. So a core component to making an IT-OT convergence program happen is creating a small cross-functional team. So leaders from OT and IT that can be focused on security. We've said before, they have these kind of flip priorities, but here these need to be a group where they can agree on their priorities, share knowledge, and really get into the very technical details. Clint's going to get into this in a second, but how do you apply cybersecurity principles? What standards do you use? These really detailed discussions need to be done by the people that should be having those discussions. So you have this small cross-functional team and clearly delineating your OT and IT folks. And on the OT side, it might be your systems integrators. These might be third-party folks for on both of these teams. So they don't necessarily have to be within a utility within an organization. Quite often you might be bringing in your third-party vendors that help you support these different components. Next slide. So really, when we're talking about who's involved in the IT-OT convergence program, you're going to have a lot of diverse perspectives. It's a pretty technical task, but as long as you have that buy-in, you have that strong executive leadership, you're defining those roles well, there's a clear vision, things are going to go a lot more smoothly in implementing the change management plan to be able to go from these very distinct teams, IT and OT never talking to each other, to having a more collaborative and accessible data that can support various different projects and bring things together. So now that we talked about who is involved in this process, Clint is going to go into really how you do it, a lot of the details.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Billy. Maddie, can we go to the next slide? So, I think it jumps 2 again. There we are. Awesome. So when we talk about the how, obviously in the small amount of time that we have here, we're not going to be able to dive into every granular detail, but really fundamentally, and what the report dives into, are what are those foundational elements that take on the how? What is that? What are those first steps, and what should you be looking for in doing? And so that's the goal of this portion of the how, is definitely to lay that framework out. And that first step is tackling data governance. And there's certain pillars to data governance. And when we approach not only this is not just utility based, but this is organizationally based. How do we approach data, and how do we look at it from a governance standpoint? And we've broken it down into 6 pillars. The first being security, not only from a standpoint of, are we making sure that our data is secure, both from an accessibility standpoint, but from a quality standpoint. We need to understand the format in terms of defining what type of data it is, the frequency of that data, the storage of that data, the criticality of that data, right? The quality of that data, the means and methods of which that process it goes through to get from where it began to where it needs to go. Oftentimes we think of that, raw, refined, curated data process. The ownership of it, who owns that, who's responsible for it, when are they responsible for it, at what stage, where are they responsible for it, and how does it get from one point to the other, is vital. Number 5 is technology, in terms of what technologies are being used, and how is that data being transferred between technology stacks, and is there any interoperability between those data stacks, or that technology stacks. And then the last piece there is accessibility. This kind of ties back into security, but more with a focus on role-based access control. What is accessing the data, and who's accessing that data? All key in terms of as we tackle data governance. Next slide. And what we found from a larger standpoint is understanding, hey, what are the standards? What does our industry look for with regards to advisement and support in developing a network and an architecture that makes the most sense? And in this report, we identified at least 4 standards, all here. If you're not familiar with them, please take a screenshot of this right now. But a majority of these are actually free online, accessible to those that have access to a web browser. But they lay the foundations on what and how and what you should move forward when with regards to critical infrastructure and cybersecurity. More focused, we're going to dive just really quickly into NIST 882 and what's available, probably the most accessible of all of these 4. Let's dive into the next slide. And that is just sample architectures. What does this look like? When we talk about OT, IT convergence, what does that look like? What does that mean? That traditional sense of, hey, our OT data is siloed or on an island, it's actually recommended against, because as we isolate our data and we put it on an island and we can't look and observe and monitor that data, we don't know what's happening, right? We don't know it's getting brought in by vendors. We don't know it's getting brought in by employees. And so having an understanding in network monitoring is so vital. And this idea of building a system on an island is starting to be more and more antiquated, because we have to monitor what's on our network. We have to understand the data that's not only being written, but being curated and created. So these are just some sample architectures of what that might look like given the systems. And next slide really dives into like your typical SCADA system, what that might look like. How do you extract that data, and how that might migrate, or what that might look like as it moves into an enterprise business network? How do you leverage that data? What are those vital controls that you might have to put in place, whether that's a firewall or maybe that's network segmentation? What are those things that you need to put in place to be able to access this data safely, securely? And what might that architecture look like? Now, both of these examples sit within NIST 882. Page references on both those slides are there, but I'd encourage each and every one of you, if you're curious on what this might need to look like, or how do we facilitate those conversations, this is the how. This is how we start doing those things. And with that, going into our next slide is really from the who, the what this is, the how we get there, the key takeaways from understanding, hey, how do we better accomplish OT IT convergence, and really bullet points, 5 key recommendations, strategic recommendations. And that's the first is understanding that we need to start with our people. We have to understand what the outcomes need to be and what people it takes to get there. I often say this, that 90% of a technology project is actually a people project. Understanding what people's processes, what the whys are, to be able to facilitate that. The technology actually becomes the easier part outside of, putting a dollar amount down. It's really getting the people engaged and not doing something for the sake of doing it. This idea of digital transformation or digital convergence for the sake of doing it to me is asinine, to say the least. It's why are we doing these things, and finding the why. Building that collaborative culture around the people, finding those easy wins. So not chasing after something that's so large that we get disenfranchised or we get discouraged from not only investing into it, but seeing that visceral impact. Leveraging what's already existing, not necessarily starting from scratch, but adjusting to accommodate what the needs are. And then this idea of planning for scale. It's really easy to do a pilot and do a one-off and then not see it go anywhere. So when we talk about this holistically across an enterprise or across a business or across a utility, is understanding, hey, how can we scale this so we can benefit the whole utility and not just silo an investment? With that, I'm going to turn it over to, I think why a lot of us are here is to listen to some of the use case studies, and Miller's going to introduce those folks. So I'll pass it back to Miller.
Perfect. Thank you, Clint. And thank you again to Billy, Jennifer, Clint, and Maddie for shepherding this project, creating this report, and being here to talk us through it today. With that, we are going to get into our first case study. Before we do, though, I wanted to point out, if anyone has any Q&A questions that they'd like to ask for any of our speakers today, there's a Q&A button up in the top of the webinar screen. Feel free to hit that at any time, type your questions in, and then I'll make sure those get asked at the end of our presentation today. So jumping into the first case study with Halifax Water. We have 3 speakers from Halifax today. The first is Stephanie LeBlanc. She is the Senior Manager of Information and Technology Services at Halifax Water. She oversees strategy and delivery for a unified ITOT team. She is responsible for an array of critical domains such as cybersecurity, architecture, data and analytics, artificial intelligence, and innovation. Secondly, we will have Justin Wilson. Justin has been working with operational technology in the water sector for 16 years. Over his career, he has been a leader in the implementation of OT cybersecurity practices, implementing secure by design approach to process control, real-time data visualization and analytics, and SCADA system modernization. He is the manager of technical services for Halifax Water, primarily responsible for electrical, instrumentation, automation, OT cybersecurity, and real-time data management. And finally, we will have Frank King. Frank is the manager of data, analytics, and visualization for Halifax Water. His team provides services in analytics, reporting, mapping, integration, automation, artificial intelligence, and innovation. Frank has 25 years of experience working in utilities, municipal and provincial governments, and educational sectors in the areas of data analytics and GIS. So Stephanie, over to you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So I just thought I'd start kind of with the people, and that's what we said was one of the first takeaways. So prior to my joining Halifax Water in 2022, we had a historic structure where IT and OT lived in separate lands under separate directors. I won't say they never spoke, but it's very different worlds. So this was the historic structure of Halifax Water. And if you go to the next slide, Maddie. With my role coming into Halifax Water, reporting up to the Director of Corporate Services, I now have IT, OT, the whole cybersecurity team, a project management office, enterprise business and applications, data analytics and visualization, and enterprise architectures is slated under our project management office. So a lot of the pieces that were spoken to in the earlier section. Next slide. For me. And just, I thought it would be good, and I know there's lots of other pieces in the slides about what unification or convergence synergy can do. This team in particular at Halifax Water really likes to work together, and they had many more things than what I have here. But some of the things that we're seeing, enterprise architecture, so that's one vision of what's at Halifax Water. And, you know, although the diagram there about IT and OT from Clint looked very, very clean and easy. When we first started, we call it the big ugly diagram because there's data everywhere, all over, and how do you bring it together? And so enterprise architecture is a big piece of that. Data governance, aggregation, analysis, automation, and AI is one of the synergies that we see. Internal and external auditing is a huge one when we can start to align standards and, you know, picking one of those, we picked NIST CSF. but aligning those standards across IT and OT and having the teams work together. We have a technology use manual for governance, policy, practices, and standards, and that branches into the practices and then branches out to IT and OT. We're very proud of that. It's our 67 policy, practices, and standards that bring IT and OT together. We have the unified IT OT team in terms of personnel and monitoring as well. So we are trying to leverage as much as we can across both teams. And with the idea of our kind of purpose is one vision, one team, and one water. And I'm going to pass it over to Justin Wilson, and he's going to talk a little bit more about our business case.
Thank you, Stephanie. So I'm going to be looking at the business case from an OT perspective primarily, and then passing it over to Frank to kind of put the bow on top of it. Before I really get into it, you do not need to try to read everything that's on the slide. This is a sample of what came out of the SWAN report. So this is our case study that we submitted. It's accessible from the SWAN website. The other point I'd like to cover before I get into it, you'll notice we're saying unification instead of convergence a lot. That's the terminology that we've adopted at Halifax Water. Convergence really is implying the merging of the systems, the teams, and the processes, and to an extent that's true, and that is very much the industry standard terminology, hence why the report is named what it is. But we felt unified approach was a much better way to visualize what we're doing. IT and OT are two very different environments. They have very different business requirements, and what's good for one is not necessarily what's good for the other. But what we do want to do is we want to try to standardize and align our approach to our work, our systems that we have, so that we can see the benefits of the unification or the convergence. Our case study really takes root and starts in the mid 90s. Halifax Water had a non-revenue water problem. So it was impacting our operational ability, our environmental side of our business, as well as financial. We had a lot of water that wasn't making it to the customers. So we were spending a lot of money making water, treating water, pumping water, and we weren't seeing any benefit coming back from it. So it was decided at the time we need to do something about this to extend the life of our treatment facility to help with managing our infrastructure. So we subdivided our city into district meter areas, and then we were using those to really facilitate repairing breaks and focusing on the areas with the highest water leakage. The centerpiece to all that was an OT data historian that aggregated all the data from the different SCADA systems and allowed us to calculate the flows going in and out of those DMAs and measure them against benchmarks. From that, we built some spreadsheets that were a very manual process, and we lived with those for about 25 years, where we'd update those daily to track and see if we had water, increased water usage within that area. A few years later, we absorbed wastewater services and we integrated them into the same data historian. And then by about 2009, we started doing OT cybersecurity and implementing that across our systems. We did a very good job of keeping all of that within our OT team. And by about 2015, we've developed a lot of skills to both do OT data management and OT cybersecurity, but we really plateaued at that point. I'd say our biggest problems were a lack of project management discipline. We didn't have the resources required to properly manage both those, and we didn't really know how to articulate and ask to get those things. And we kind of stayed in that space for a few years, and by about 2021, the reorg that Stephanie referred to started, and the very first step of that was bringing the IT and the OT team under the same director, and then integrating the cyber program. I still remember that first meeting very well. I went in the room with the IT manager and senior manager at the time, and they said, we've got about 13 projects going on right now for cybersecurity. We want to see where we can align with you guys. We know you have everything under control and you're really advanced, so we don't expect there to be much. By the time we came out of that meeting, the two things became clear. One, we need to be part of about 11 of those 13 projects. And two, there was a big misunderstanding between the organization and our team. While we were screaming that we needed help, the organization was hearing that we got this. So that was the biggest benefit from the ITOT unification that we got, was we kind of got a voice at the table. We got representation and the resources behind us to do things we knew we needed to do, and to do it in a smart way where we were integrated with the rest of the organization. the thing that really made that work, though, both parties went into it knowing that what are the organizational priorities? I don't have to be 1A on everything. So most of those, the OT team is 1B on those projects. And we've now had about 5 years of a successful integrated IT/OT cybersecurity program, and we're making great strides. The next thing up for that was the data analytics program. So our data analytics and visualization team led by Frank, they started working on automating that manual solution that we have, and he's really going to talk to that here in the next slide. And they took it to the next level by really pulling in multiple systems worth of data. So, as much as in our presentation as in our work, I'm going to hand this over to Frank after I laid all the groundwork, and he's going to make this a beautiful presentation for you. So over to you, Frank.
Wow. Thanks, Justin, for all of that. All right. As Justin set the table for me, one of the use cases of the convergence is whiteboard analytics. And it's the combination of OT, AMI, and GIS, and that's our use case. The slide we got up here is the end result. I'm going to speak a little bit about the process leading up to this dashboard. AMI data has been in our data warehouse. Our customer portal relied on the reporting of such AMI data. However, GIS and OT data were not part of our data warehouse. No different than many of our other application systems, data sets prior to our data and analytics program being stood up, the data warehouse that we have functioned as a hub and spoke to move data between enterprise systems. So we've launched about 40 different dashboards across our organization in the last 2 years since we've launched our data and analytics program. No different than any other deliverable. The process is kind of the same. Business analyst captures the requirements. They've been speaking to Justin and his team, understanding what their current challenges is and what the future vision is. Justin stated that it was quite manual and used Excel. Well, now we're building the data pipelines. We've got the database analysts who have a dual role of not only doing the pipelines, but also being the Power BI developers. Semantic models were built, and here are the visualizations to go along with the requirements. We've got selections by regions, meter zones, data points include service point, meter status, average captured flow, yesterday's variance, meter zone flow versus consumption. Lots of the data that Justin and his team and the organization were looking for. And he mentioned the non-revenue water committee, and they're actively taking through this dashboard through its paces right now. We still have data quality issues and anomalies with all of the different data sources. Again, OT, AMI, GIS. We still have gaps in geotagging of all the AMI endpoints. Not all meters are being read. There's some issues with DMA boundaries. That said, these data issues were present before in the Excel manual solution. And right now they're coming more to light now that we have this, and we're able to correct a lot of the data problems and anomalies. With that, Maddie, I'm wondering if you can go to the next CAN SWAN slide. All right, thanks. So with all that, the future enhancements and key takeaways. So I think we're about to go live in production as soon as Justin and his team give us the green light, including feedback from the non-revenue water committee with that whiteboard analytics dashboard. We've also got our eyes on possible future enhancements. So we could overlay the CMS data for water main breaks and leaks. Let's bring in yet another enterprise system to go with the OT, the AMI, and the GIS. We can bring in a mapping visualization as well. Big takeaways from this exercise is that there's going to be benefits with operational insights and proactive decision making. Better customer service. There should be improvements to asset management, obviously strategic decision making, and emergency response. We're going to have some real-time insights on what's happening out on the ground in all locations within Halifax. Finally, the unexpected outcome. So once again, I'll take you back to the data warehouse and its infancy with just being a hub and spoke. Now, and never being able to integrate OT data with any other data source. Now all of a sudden we've got this dashboard that's out there that's being presented to lots of different end users across a couple of different departments. And they're saying, oh my heavens, you guys can combine OT with all these other enterprise systems. The demand is now, it is very difficult to keep up with. So that's our unexpected outcome. And I believe that's the end of this part of the presentation. And much like Justin was pointing out before, a lot of what we just spoke about is in the paper here with SWAN. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much to Stephanie, Justin, and Frank from Halifax Water. We will move on now to our second case study. So this comes to us from Loudon Water, and we have Andy Kraft, who is the director of OT, on with us. So Andy has been involved with OT for over 30 years as part of the water sector. He played a pivotal role in industrial control system integration, building automation, automated meter infrastructure, and deploying OT cybersecurity technologies. He is currently the director of operations technology at Loudon Water. He regularly participates in cyber-related discussions with CISA and the Intel community. Andy is also the current co-chair of the Water ISAC Cybersecurity Advisory Committee. So Andy, over to you for your case study.
Thank you very much. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're going to focus on what our technology services culture looks like, and go through some of the items of note, and then we'll touch on the report itself as well. So really for us, we were a very traditional water utility. We had the IT team, we had the OT team. We kind of grew up together over the last, 2-3 decades, whatever it was. But really, as the company evolved and grew and we started introducing new technologies, we kind of came to the realization that how we govern our technologies had to evolve. So in 2022, I had a conversation with our IT director, and we came to the conclusion that it was really time to take a step back and create a common governance structure, much like Halifax, that we call technology services. This was a decision that was really supported by our executive management team, and was really more of a forward-thinking best practices model that we wanted to implement, that really covered both the IT and the OT teams. Now, one of the great things about how we approached this, and some of it was a little bit of happenstance, but it really came down to, early on, the IT team didn't want to have a whole lot to do with what we were doing on the OT side. They had enough to do on their own, whether, through all the other projects that they were involved with. So we developed a pretty robust in-house team that covered everything from technicians to programmers and application support, infrastructure support, networking, a lot of the things that you might find on the IT side. We did that all within the OT team. But it really came down to, in 22, we decided we wanted to take a serious look at how this would work together with a common governance structure, so we could put some best practices in place. And that's what we did. So there's still an IT team, there's still an OT team. There is an acknowledgement and an appreciation that the business side is there to manage the business, and the OT side is really here to maintain and protect the core mission of the business, right? Creating drinking water, treating wastewater. So both sides understand what their missions are, but we also know that through collaboration, we're able to support each other in many different ways. There's There's some common technologies that we use. There's some common infrastructure that we use. And because of that, we are able to have these joint get-togethers, if you will, because we co-manage some of the assets that are out there. And we have a very strong culture of collaboration between the two teams now. And we'll talk about what some of those collaboration points here, not all of them, in a slide here in just a second. But really, we try to encompass everything, right? So on the business side, it's obviously all things business. But on the OT side, it's not just process control. It was really the building automation, which tended to get left behind. And it was our access and video security systems, which is another technology that was out there that often would get left out because it was those folks over there and they were just doing their thing. And we decided, no, all technologies really had to come under the umbrella of technology services, and that's really what we did. And we're definitely firm believers in culture, right? Culture is what drives success. I love the Peter Drucker quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." I'm a firm believer in that. Our real approach here, before we go to the next slide, I'm like a lot of folks that struggle with the term convergence. I'm not a huge fan of the word. The notion is not so bad, but we think of it more along the lines of think of a train running down the track. IT's one rail, OT's another rail. The business is the train. We both support the business. We both have a role to play. Our missions are slightly different, but in the end, our goal is to get the train where it needs to go. Next slide, please. So a couple of places where we collaborate and we have touch points. And again, you're going to hear some echoes of what the folks from Halifax were saying. So we have a very robust BI platform where we're bringing data together to create dashboards, and we have a number of dashboards, probably way too many to do in a 10-minute conversation. But we bring all that together to be able to inform the business so they can make good, sound decisions. We create that actionable intelligence. Cybersecurity is a huge piece of what we do. My IT team is my outer defense for OT, so I love everything that they do. We work together. We have a common risk and safety governance structure. And we both participate in tabletop exercises and all the things that go along with good governance. So cyber is a great point that we constantly collaborate on. We leverage, in general, we leverage all the technologies that the IT team provides, just like most modern utilities now. Whether it's change management or ticketing systems, work orders, all that stuff. But we also are able to marry some of that operational technology data into those systems, so we get a much better, more robust outcome and better overall usage by the business. Again, I touched on governance. That's really a big thing as far as informing our executive management. We're very keen on making sure that the groups come together. And again, even our governance is even extended out into our physical and access and video security systems. They are all part of that conversation now. And the last piece that I'll mention as kind of a common structure here really is that communications piece. So we had a very large project that we did with our IT partners to create a very robust communication framework that we use to connect to all of our remote facilities. It was a multi-year project, and both sides of the house really had to come together and collaborate in order to make that a success that we did. So probably getting close on time here, so I will kind of work my way through this. So next slide, please. This was just some background. Key takeaway off this slide is the quote at the bottom here, which is systems that are already in production are very difficult to update, and sometimes they take considerable time. So that was a problem that we had. Go to the next slide, please. the roles we talked about, we don't have to worry too much about vendors. That was a piece that was not so much of a problem for us because we're fairly self-sufficient in-house, which I think may be a little different than some of the folks that are on the call. We don't rely on a lot of outside vendors for support. So that was a piece that we didn't have to worry about. But one of the things I want to take away from this is that we do continue to learn best practices between the groups. There's things in OT that I do that the IT staff does not do, and vice versa. And we constantly go back and forth and we learn from each other and learn about best practices between the team. So I think it's really important to continue to do that. And then one more slide, I think, is my final slide. You know, our really key takeaway here is developing that culture, whether it's operational culture, data sharing, or really, in my mind, more importantly, the cybersecurity aspects of it. It's really important to have those get-togethers to really talk about things. You know, one of the big takeaways that we had was really about visibility and getting in here and really understanding our environments. I think that's really key. And the last piece here, again, my quote at the bottom, which is, you know, small steps. If you're not on this journey, it's okay. You don't have to take a big step. Take the small steps. Do something. Small steps are better than not doing any steps at all. So I really would encourage everybody to take the small steps if they have them. And I think that's it for me.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Andy. And once again, thanks to Loudon Water for presenting that. Okay, that comes to the end of our case studies that we wanted to show. But if anybody can stick on for a few more minutes, we will do a quick facilitated discussion here. Before we get to that, of course, the full text of the report can be accessed through the SWAN website for our SWAN members. There is also an interactive version of the report that you can essentially click through and sort of interact with it more as a living piece of text rather than just the standard version. So either way. And of course, if there are any questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A and we'll get to those in just a few minutes here. Before we get to the open Q&A, I did have a couple of questions I wanted to lead our speakers to address. What you're seeing on the screen right now is let's say lovingly known as the BUD in the report. That stands for Big Ugly Diagram. This was put together as part of the report, and it's a useful visual for kind of showing how messy this can potentially be when we talk about the interaction between the IT and the OT sides of a utility organization. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of interactivity, and deciding where you draw that line can be extremely difficult and messy for people to figure out. And, you know, Andy, I think specifically talked about it just a moment ago. We talk about convergence. Convergence is a bit of a buzzword. Whether or not we are actually talking about convergence of those departments, IT and OT, or whether we are talking about convergence in terms of the interaction of their work product, I think is a worthwhile thing to talk about. So I would ask our speakers to jump in as they see fit, but are we actually talking about IT and OT departments being one singular department, or are we talking about two departments that are sort of by definition diametrically opposed in their responsibilities and priorities coming together to cooperate? And again, I'll steal a line from my favorite author. Maybe convergence is not the right word, but it's the first word that comes to mind. So thoughts on that?
Well, I'm unmuted. I'll jump in here real quick. I think it depends on the organization. It depends on the maturity of the organization. As we all know, the water utility, you know, there's 50-some thousand municipal water utilities, about 16,000 wastewater utilities. Every one of them is different. If you've seen one water utility, you've seen one water utility. So it's going to depend. Resources, budgets. I don't think there's a one size fits all.
Generally, I agree with Andy, and it's going to be a size of the organization, but at the very least, if you're, I don't think your IT and your OT team should be the same team, but they at least have to be sitting close together. They have to be able to work together.
I'll jump in, Miller. I think in the spirit of the not only the paper, but also I think up into the presentations up in this point, I think that former, or excuse me, that latter that you explained, this idea of coming together for a unified goal, finding those things, those opportunities to leverage data across the utility to be able to effectively manage and improve operations and business processes is vital in coming together and working together. And I think that in itself is the spirit. And I 100% agree with what's been set up to this point. It's so dependent on the utility size, utilities resources, investment, priorities. But holistically, whether the IT and OT departments are separate or together, I think the realization and the objectives of those departments are still they clash a bit. And so I think this idea of, hey, how do we work together? How do we bring this together to make a more meaningful utility is at the key of this.
Yeah, I agree with everyone's thoughts. I think size is going to dictate some of it, but I would take it from the vantage point of people looking at technology. So other business units looking at technology, do they see it as one or two? Do they, how do we make it easier for them? Because I'll just say, like, from the technology use manual standpoint for us, and it's from a cybersecurity lens, but it's all of our use policies and practices. If users had to go figure out, oh, I want to do this, but I have to go to the OT page to do this, and oh, I want IT, and I go, like, some people will know the difference and some people will not. So if you look at from the vantage point of your customer or client looking at technology, that's one of the benefits at Halifax Water. They know it's technology. I know it's technology. It has lights and whatever. So I'm just going to ask the technology team and they'll vet it in the background.
And actually, that brings us to, I'm going to freelance a little bit here, because one of the questions that has come up in the Q&A, I think relates directly to this and is a great question from Christopher Warner. Did either Halifax or Loudon have to work with, or aside from larger enterprise systems such as a city IT department that may have an entirely different set of policy directions or rules that had to be conformed to?
I guess I can go first. The answer in our case is no. We are an authority, therefore we're a self-contained quasi-government organization. So we're not affiliated with county government or any local municipality. Our revenue stream is derived from services that we provide. We're not reliant on taxes or anything else in the area. So we're, in that regard, we're different than a lot of munis that would be out there.
I would say the same, similar, and Justin or Frank will correct me, similar for Halifax Water. The one thing that we have, being in Canada and Nova Scotia, is we have a lot of provincial legislation around data governance and where our data is allowed to be housed and stored. And so our privacy laws do bind us. So we do have extra regulations there that others may not.
Well, once again, we've kind of come to the conclusion that every municipality, every treatment plant, every organization, every utility is slightly different and is going to have a slightly different answer to a question like that. But yeah, it is something to consider that you might have an overarching enterprise organization that has different rules separate from what has been put together by the specific water or wastewater folks. One of the other questions I wanted to lead the group to, while we have a few minutes left here, is when you were approaching these projects and approaching the application of these digital tools, did you have any interesting or maybe unexpected conversations around the pros and cons of looking at these solutions? Were there any conversations that came up that maybe had surprising requests from people or surprising outcomes, either on the pro or con side of putting in these sorts of digital tools?
Since nobody else is jumping on this, you want to go first, Andy? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right. I was going to say for us, when we started down this path, I talked earlier about the cyber program like that. I think we really fell into lockstep with that. Everybody had the same goals going forward. When it came more to the data analytics visualization side of things, I think the one thing that really surprised me, I shouldn't say surprised me, but as we got talking to more and more folks in that space, was kind of I'll say lack of understanding that we what we had on the OT side. We kind of quickly found out we were referred to as shadow IT throughout the organization. Um, folks didn't know what we did, what data we even had accessible, and what the general security practices around that data were. So we get questions like, "Can I just have access to all your treatment plant data?" Well, no, because it's in the secured space. We can get you access. We can talk to you about what the data is, and we can make it available to you. But no, you can't get in and start poking around for yourself. So it was just kind of the I'll say the lack of awareness that we even existed was what surprised me the most.
Yeah, we're probably a little different than that. People always knew what we were, generally speaking, but we were the black box, right? It's going to work. It's just this thing that sits over there in the treatment plant. We don't have to worry about it. And as the group started talking to each other, I think folks finally came to the understanding that there was way more stuff in the OT environment than they ever thought possible, right? I mean, the number, not that I'm going to throw anything specific out here, but the number of switches that I have within my environment vastly outnumbers what's on the business side, just because of the nature of what we have. But really, one of the things that I found throughout my career, I think that is very appropriate to this conversation, is that when you give somebody a tool that they've never had before, they find inventive ways to use it. So when you start, so for us, I'll give you a great example. Between our water plant and our wastewater plant, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 points of data that we log into our historian as fast as they change, right? That's the whole idea of the OT historian. That data had never made it completely into the business so the business could make decisions. And now that we've been able to tie that information into our BI platform, now that we've been able to bring in extra data like from our AMI system, the business is finding very inventive ways to take that intelligence that we developed for them from the raw data and do something with it, right? And, like anything else, you give them a taste of what's there, they're going to say, "Oh, you can do this. Now, can you do something else?" And I think all of us have stories to share that we could say, "I give you a little bit and you want you want this much more." And then it becomes kind of like this big snowball. And I think that's one of the really great benefits of looking at, bringing, whether you want to call it convergence or collaboration or governance or whatever word you find appropriate for your organization. By bringing the folks together, there is very positive outcomes for the business.
Absolutely. I think that snowball can be hugely valuable in terms of building momentum toward these things. But, like a snowball rolling down a hill, you don't want it to get out of control. It has to be controlled and planned. We're coming right up against the end of the hour here. So I had one more question from the chat that I wanted to pose. This is more for the project leaders. Fiona Poole asks, when putting together the report, how did you decide to structure it? What key themes did you draw out? And any guidance for putting together reports and playbooks like this in cooperation with, members such as the SWAN members?
I guess I'd start by just saying the really zeroing in on the why was key. We talk a lot about cool technologies in SWAN, but technology in and of itself doesn't necessarily solve a business problem. So being able to articulate what problem you're solving is really key. And I think we organized somewhat around that. I don't know if the others have a different thought.
Billy or Clint, anything else to add there? Or I agree, Jennifer. I think that's absolutely critical with putting together a report like this.
I would just say it was not a linear process for sure. It took a lot of, and especially I think once we had really the OT cybersecurity folks in the room that really knew the technical things, that really grounded us in a way to frame it. And so I think that it was really huge in having support from those folks.
Perfect. Okay, well, we are at time, in fact, a little bit over time. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for the folks from Halifax, the folks from Loudon, and of course the project leads who put all this together. Thank you to Maddie for sort of being the quarterback and running all of this. And hopefully this was useful for everyone, and we will see you in the next SWAN Americas call.
Thank you, everybody. Be on the lookout for the recording and recap. Have a great day, and thank you for joining.